righty, here we go. Back on a Wednesday. Into February we go. As the weather continues to be cold, action heating up on the floor in high school basketball, high school sports at large. Good to be back on the show. Been a couple of weeks since we last did a Gem City Sports podcast, but life continues to be busy, as it always is. We're getting into the crux of the seasons now. Of course, my job at Gannon requires that with all of our teams great, you just don't have a lot of time all the time. But it's going to be back in the saddle tonight. Big episode coming your way over the course of the next few minutes or so. And happy to be joined in just a couple of minutes as well by Tom Koval. He'll be joining us in just a moment or so. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast brought to you by our friends at Rebich Investments. Keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more information on how they can help you through your financial life, go to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can simply call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433 is the number to dial. Rebich Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. Lots of high school basketball talk tonight, given the fact that we're nearing playoffs, which is kind of wild to think about. It always seems like this time of year just sneaks up on us, but lo and behold, we're almost there, and here we are. Tom Koval back on the show, joining us once again in what has been a really interesting season, I think, for a lot of reasons, Tom. And we're going to get into the boys and girls in just a bit, and we're going to try to do some bracketology tonight and give you a sense of where we think the District 10 playoff brackets could shake out. But, you know, Tom, I think every year we talk, really since the realignment last season, specifically in regions, how both on the boys and girls side, there are regions in particular that we look at and we think are just so deep and competitive. And you've seen a bunch of games. You went to one last night that featured a pair of Region 6 teams in Fairview and Northwestern. I think outside of maybe one or two teams that are very at the top, this just seems like a wide open tournament because it just doesn't seem like any of these teams, guys or girls, have really been able to grasp hold of they are clearly 1B to the 1As, right? I mean, we're going to talk in length a lot tonight, of course, about the Northwesterns, about the Cathedral Preps, maybe Fairview there at the top of Region 6. But really, for the most part, it doesn't feel like there has been a lot of things going on that and, you know, Tom, it's so interesting when we get into the conversation about who are 1A, 1B, 1C. If you take out Prep on the guy's side, you take out maybe Northwestern on the girls' side, it just doesn't feel like there is a dominant team in District 10 this year. And I think that makes for fun playoffs as we go down the road. I don't know if we've said that in previous years. What's your take so far as we head to the playoffs and what you're seeing so far around District 10?
Yeah, you've seen a lot of teams split games or have games that are a lot closer, or one team beats Team A and then Team A beats Team B that lost to Team C. Like it's been really interesting to see whether it's matchups and just a different strategy in those games, or if it's the fact that the competition level is pretty close and you don't know who's going to win each night, which does make it very fun.
So I want to get into a little bit of talk tonight. This evening, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a sense of, okay, which teams do we think could be the top of the playoff bracket and what teams we think could be those maybe dark horses as we go through the tournament. Let's start on the girls' side, because I think we talk a lot about the guys, Region 6, Region 7, and we're going to get into them in a bit. But I was really intrigued when I looked at the last couple of weeks. And Region 3 is normally where we always go, right? Of course, Region 6 is the Harbor Creeks, the Fairviews, the Coreys of the world. We're going to get to that in a minute. But Region 3 for me is very tantalizing because we thought in January that it would be a two-horse race, right? With respect to Mercyhurst Prep, we figured, okay, Seneca and Northwestern, because they had so much coming back. Northwestern, of course, with MPP. Seneca had, I think, 4 of their 5 returning starters back from a year ago. We figured those two would be right at the top of the podium. But then you get Mercyhurst Prep, who's still in play. I mean, their record doesn't necessarily speak, I think, for the talent that they have. They're 8-9, but I think they're better than what their record shows. And then there's Eisenhower that has thrown themselves into the mix, and you could argue has had the most impressive 3 straight loss streak all season with any team. obviously Northwestern and Seneca are going to compete for the region title. I'm not really worried about the region title, but when you look at, Tom, that part of the bracket, in the fact that Seneca, Mercyhurst Prep, Northwestern, all 3A, Eisenhower also now in 3A. What do you make of those top four teams? And should we be giving the Eisenhowers and Mercyhurst Preps of the world more credit based on what we've seen? Because I think these standings are a lot closer than what the numbers suggest.
I agree. You made a great point. Those three losses are tough losses, and you wonder how a team like Eisenhower can handle it, losing by 2 to Seneca and then 3 to Mercyhurst Prep and in single digits to Northwestern. So they're right there. But you got to win the game, right? And those teams are finding ways to win, even though it's close. So I'm definitely giving the edge to those teams that are getting the wins, but you got to be very careful because that's a dangerous team, and a turnover here or there, foul trouble here or there, and Eisenhower is good enough that they're going to beat somebody.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit more about the Knights. I mean, their last 3 games, it's been quite crazy. And as of this recording, we're recording a bit early tonight. They're in action against Harbor Creek. It's the non-region game, so how they fare, we don't know. Maybe it's a 4th straight loss, but Harbor Creek's pretty good there. But, you make the argument that the Seneca game could have been theirs to win, right? Given the fact that there was a bucket at the end that was debatable, right? Whatever you want to call it, you can call it. But that was close. It ends up being a 2-point game. Then you have to go home 2 days later. You have to face Mercyhurst Prep. That one's not an easy one either, right? Because Dan Perfetto's defense is always good. You lose that game by 3. But I'll say this. The game I was most impressed with Eisenhower was the Northwestern game on Monday. There really isn't a team this season, and I include Seneca in that mix, that has given Northwestern as many headaches, save for Fairview, which was a non-region game early in the season, as that of Eisenhower. I was impressed with the way the Knights played. And my thought process is, easily more than really anybody, Tom, that it's hard to beat a team twice. It's even harder to beat a team 3 times in a season. And I just get the feeling that if it's these 4 at the end in 3A, which it seems like we're on some sort of a collision course for at least 3 of those teams to be there at the end, that it's going to be really difficult, I think, for Eisenhower to be beaten again and again by all 3 of these teams. Just my thoughts. What are your thoughts on how close maybe Eisenhower, Mercyhurst Prep are to the top 2 teams there in Northwestern and Seneca?
When any sport, right, those conference games, they're battles because the team so well. You play them twice in the regular season. The coach is scouting them all the time. Like, all their plays, you know their tendencies, right? So it just comes down to grit and grinding it out and making a play here or there to determine who's going to win the game. So those type of games can go either way when it comes to the playoffs. If something bad happens and one of your girls gets in foul trouble and all of a sudden you're playing differently, that other team gets the advantage. So it's you never know which way those games are going to go, which makes it so fun, right? To have those rivalries like that and really getting to know those teams. As a coach, you get excited about that because you're really looking at strategy and planning on what they have done in the past and what might they do differently, right? All those things come into play. But at the end of the day, who makes that one bucket at the end may come down to really make the decision.
I mean, you look, Tom, and I know we're harping on Eisenhower here, but you look at their schedule. They're 1-5 against teams that we just named, specifically Northwestern and Seneca and Mercyhurst Prep. And yet, the losses haven't been by many at all, right? I mean, there's 2 Seneca games where combined 3 points of loss, right? And that was the 3rd game of the season. They hosted Seneca back in December. They lost that game by 1. That one was close. They have a win against Mercyhurst Prep that was on the road just 3 days after they lost to Seneca. And then Northwestern results 51-39, 56-49. They've been within those games as well. And I just think it bodes, the question that it bodes to me is, when we get to the postseason, there's still a few games left to go, but the region slate's pretty much done. The 2 big questions I have in 3A for the girls, specifically with the teams in that region, are, number 1, is Michaela Presser-Palmer capable of carrying a team again this year?
Yes.
Which I say that as a caveat because it's clear she can carry a team, right? Now that we know that she's committed to Arizona, she's still been herself all this year, right? I get the box score for every game. She's up near 30, 32 a game. At least it seems that way every single game. But I think last year, the Senecas of the world, Mercyhurst Prep, Eisenhower, they didn't have the years of experience that they now have because most of their starters are back. So I wonder if this year MPP alone is going to be enough to win Northwestern a District 10 title. The Wildcats still have plenty of other players, right? It's not like Michaela is the only one, but she's certainly the one. Do you think this year, based on the talent that 3A has, is Michaela capable of carrying a team to a District 10 championship this season? And what's your take on that as we go to the playoffs?
I think what's so great about her as a player is that she creates opportunities for her teammates, right? She's not a selfish player, even though she's getting lots of points, like she gets them within herself. She doesn't force things. So I think, yes, she can carry her team because her team plays with her. They know the roles. And they've stepped up when they've needed to. They use her for the points that she gets, but she's not afraid to pass to her teammates. Her teammates aren't afraid to take big shots when they need to. So I think that epitomizes how good of a player that she is, because she will make those players have great opportunities, and it's hard to prepare for something like that.
So Region 3, one to watch out for. I wanted to lead with that because I think it's a perfect transition into what we're going to get in 4A. You, of course, are around Fairview all the time, right? You coached a couple of youth teams there. Your season's just wrapped up. Congratulations, by the way. I hear the end of the season championship trophies in your house. I'd like to see that championship trophy right next to the Bryant jersey the next time that we're on, by the way. Because I joke with you, every single time that you're on, you have another plaque, mural, or jersey of some kind. That shot's getting a little wider every time we see you, Tom. But man, I'm all here for it. 4A is going to be intriguing because now Corey's in the mix. And I think the way Corey's been able to play this season, and the fact that they're 3 in their last 5, they do have a loss to Harbor Creek a week and a half or so back. But they're scary because I don't think they have an ace player. They have just 6, 7, 8 players that can score the basketball, and they play ridiculously good defense. I mean, their defense is second to none. Harbor Creek and Fairview are in there too. They, of course, are always going to be there at the end. What credence do you give to this Corey team, Tom, as we get towards the playoff stretch, and specifically those 3 teams in Region 6? To me, it's a huge battle. How do you see that potentially playing out, and just your assessment on where we see things right now in that 4A classification?
Well, I could be wrong, right? That won't be the first time. But I saw Corey in Fairview up close. I was actually pigeonholed into doing the announcing for that game, and that was the first time I've done that. And I'm trying to announce the scoring as the game goes through while I'm watching the game, because I get so into watching it as a coach. And I noticed the fourth quarter, I wasn't announcing much for Fairview, and looking at the end of the game, they didn't score the entire fourth quarter. So I don't know that it was just a nuance that Corey got them that night, but they're loaded. Corey's loaded with athletes. I know a lot of those girls play volleyball. The West girl's a freshman, very long. She gave Paige some trouble guarding her on the perimeter sometimes. Fairview missed a lot of shots they typically make. They just got in a drought. But a team like that's physical and can play defense, I've always said to my teams, even if you can't score, if you can play defense, you're going to be in the game. And Corey hung around, and offensively, they would get a steal and a bucket. They would get a rebound and a bucket, and they chipped away and they got the lead, and they won the game. So a team that plays physical like that, I think they're in the mix for any wins for sure. If you were to tell me who's the better basketball team, Harbor Creek, Fairview for sure, but I wouldn't bet against them.
What's fascinating to me, and the reason that I think Corey could be really challenging down the stretch, and we say this, of course, there are still a few games left. Corey Fairview round 2's tomorrow. I don't know if you're going to be at that. It's at Corey, Tom, but it's going to be a heck of a game, and really it could be for the region championship. I mean, Harbor Creek will have something else to say for that. Corey still has to play Harbor Creek on the last day of the season, so there's still some to be ironed out there. But when you look at 4A, and this has always been this way, but defense is going to lead the day, right? You look at the stats for all 3 of those teams, and I don't think there's a single team that averages more than 40 a game. Right. Maybe Corey, Harbor Creek are a slight tick above that, but The reason that I think Corey can play here is particularly the antithesis is why Northwestern to me is the lead dog still in 3A, is Corey doesn't have a 1A player. And I think the depth part is going to play a big role here. You know, Paige Garrity is a stud. Aaron Garrity's team every single year they have depth. But I don't know. Does it become a situation where you're a little bit too reliant on Paige? Does Gabriella Pizzo have to play more of a big role? Is Lockett, in that 3 spot, going to have to play a huge call later on too? What I wonder with this, Tom, is it more of a battle of attrition in 4A? And to me, I think that gives Corey a little bit of an edge. They don't have the experience factor in terms of Fairview Harbor Creek nearly playing for this 4A title seemingly every year since COVID. But I wonder if depth is going to be a factor because of these teams and the way they play defense, and that these defenses are simply too good to allow a stud to beat them. And Corey's not like that. Am I wrong in thinking that way?
No, I don't think so. But I would say that almost all the stars that we see, especially for the girls, have no problem sharing the ball. They make plays in other positions, but when you look at Corey specifically, I don't know how many of those girls play volleyball, but they have experience, right? A lot of those girls that played volleyball that went to the state championship, they know what it's like in crunch time to play hard and have to make a play. And just seeing them in that game with Fairview in the fourth quarter, they played really tough. And they're strong, right? The girls look strong. They play strong. Defensively, they battle for rebounds. That grit will make plays for you to win big games. So I think they're going to be right in the mix in the playoffs because of that. But like you said, you have a girl like Paige Garrity, Ella Pizzo, that have some playoff experience as well. So those basketball players are going to have to step up and show that, hey, we're basketball players. We're going to make plays in these playoff games to make the difference. But it's going to be a battle in that district playoff bracket. That's for sure.
3A and 4A are tantalizing on the girls' side, and we still have, I think, in 4A some questions left to be deciphered, but it is cool that we're seeing other teams enter their names into the hat. I think in previous years, Tom, and we sat on this podcast, we talked last year, that while there was competition towards the end of the season, we anticipated, okay, Northwestern Seneca probably going to be the 3A championship. It's going to be more than likely Harbor Creek Fairview in the 4A championship, and that's what transpired. This year may not be the case. And I think if you're sitting there, any of the teams that we've mentioned in those 2 classes, you're probably thrilled that there are more than just 2 spots available for state playoffs, because this is the year where you need them, because one or 2 teams in either classification that we just mentioned is going to absolutely deserve to be in the playoffs. And without those spots, you'd be out. So thank goodness for that situation. And now I think the rest of the regular season is fascinating because it makes for very interesting bracket predictions, bracket deliberations, and you can make a case that outside of maybe Northwestern sitting at the 1, that there could be an argument made for any of the teams we mentioned to be the 1 and minimum the 2 seed in those classifications. And to me, Tom, it makes it really interesting to see because matchups are such a big thing, right? Like if I'm Eisenhower, I wouldn't necessarily mind playing Northwestern to the semifinals. I'd rather play Seneca. I'd probably rather play Mercyhurst Prep, but you haven't played the Wildcats bad. Concurrently, if I'm a team sitting there like a Corey, do I really want to have to face Fairview or Harbor Creek in the semis, right? So the number 1 seed becomes such a big part now because matchups, I think, I don't necessarily know if seeding is going to mean much if the matchups suit the lower seeded team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But at the same time, I'd rather be a 1 seed and maybe one of those really good teams gets knocked off. And instead of having to win 2 big games, now you only have to win 1. Harbor Creek, Corey, and Fairview, I mean, we're certainly going to see because they all play each other in this next week. So things are going to change dramatically, right? They play tonight, which you mentioned, and then I think Corey plays Harbor Creek, and I know Fairview goes out to Harbor Creek to play them at the end of the season as well. So it's going to be we're going to see how things play out for sure, and it's kind of a preface to what the playoffs is about to bring to us.
All right, so we're talking boys basketball in a second, Tom. Great stuff from the girls. We'll talk boys in a minute. We do want to first, though, of course, thank our sponsor, Rebish Investments, that keep financial guidance simple. They're invested in local sports just like we are. They love everything about sports from high school to college to the Erie Otters and more. If you want more information, you can go to the website, www.rebishinvestments.com, or you can simply call their phone number during normal business hours at 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Boys Hoops now. Similar conversation, Tom. I want to start with this and give you the floor. You've seen some games. You watched one last night, Fairview and Northwestern in a Region 6 game. The Tigers, they look good. They always do. Pat Flaherty's got his team rolling. Tyler DeVecchio, for me, is an underdog candidate for District 10 Player of the Year, although it's going to probably go to Thompson and Meraki from Prep. Who are the teams that you have seen recently that you're like, all right, those guys in the playoffs, clearly the teams to watch in the postseason?
Well, clearly to watch, not clearly do I know who's going to win. But
I don't think any of us do.
Right? I mean, Erie and McDowell are going to do what they do every year and just battle as it comes to the playoffs, right? I know you called the game last night. I watched the game on Huddle and just saw that battle defensively. Shannon had them playing really well. They guarded the three really well, and McDowell did not shoot it as well as they have in the past. Prep is going to be fun to watch. They got three super solid players, and even more than that, they're very deep. And then you go into Harbor Creek and Fairview, which are going to be battling teams for playoff wise. I mean, there's a lot of good boys teams to watch. You got Kenny Godoy at Girard. Boy, the Eisenhower boys team is really solid too. Watch out for them. All those teams that I mentioned are going to be really fun to watch in the playoffs, I think, and I'm sure I missed a couple as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I got a chance to see Eisenhower back when they first played Mercyhurst Prep in that region game, a game they led by 19 and lost. The Hansen brothers are crazy, scary. And Liam Hansen is actually, I think, a better player than Austin Hansen. He's only a freshman. Yes. So there's no doubt Eisenhower going to be there at the end. I want to jump in for a couple of minutes to McDowell Erie. And you just mentioned, I called the game last night. You were watching, and Erie wins the second rendition, 53-49. It was not a particularly tantalizing offensive game, but I don't think either of those two teams are worried about sexy plays. They just want to score points, play good defense when they need to play good defense and win ball games. So now these two teams have each won once, right? McDowell 66-55 at Paul Goal on the 16th. Erie wins last night in their home building. When you were in this matchup, Tom, and I said this on the broadcast last night to my broadcast partner, John Kavanaugh, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit more. The one thing I said is that this year it feels like the rivalry has evolved a little bit because it almost feels like there's a changing of the guard in terms of how these teams play. When you and McDowell played, at least from my observation, you wanted to play solid defense, but you were okay with running the floor because you had a lot of athletes that could get to the spaces that McDowell wasn't, and that was the advantage, right? McDowell just wanted to basically put you into a box, right? Whether it was Blaze Myers, Baby Porter, they could attack you on the inside and then dish it out from low to high for guys like Camden Kramer and the like who could just shoot the three. And last night, what I saw in the game, which was so fascinating, is Erie was more than happy to just throw it down on the post to Jaden Stewart and let him eat last night in the second half. That was essentially Erie's offense in the fourth quarter, and McDowell couldn't stop it. And every time the Trojans wanted to get into their game and Kevin O'Connor wanted to try to run the floor, right, play aggressive defense, go to that full court trap, it just didn't seem like they were comfortable with it last night. You mentioned, of course, they didn't shoot the three ball well. That's a huge part of it. They only made, I think, 3 or 4 threes all game long. In fact, there was only one player in the game last night on either side that made multiple three-pointers. But I feel like it's evolved and maybe changed a little bit this year in the way the strategies are being played out. What do you make of the game last night from your perch with Erie getting a win last night against McDowell, and now they set up a rubber match in the District 10 championship game in a couple weeks?
Well, I think with public schools, things change. Maybe not every year, but every few years, the makeup of your team is different. And with Stewart inside, I think that was a huge difference for Erie this game as opposed to game one. You know, I think he only scored maybe 7 points in the first game, and I think he had 17 last night. Yeah. So, you know, that's kind of Erie's focal point is to put it inside, get in the post, bang around. He does a good job passing it to the perimeter as well. And Erie will hit some threes now and then, but I think the way Erie plays this year is a lot different than the way McDowell plays. And a lot of the stuff you talked about with Baby Porter, in them when I was coaching, they're a different team now. With the Marsh cousins, and Leo that can shoot threes, they are definitely up and down the floor, and they want to shoot a lot of threes, high volume. And if they're not making them, they're struggling. So just by looking at that score last night, that definitely favors Erie High. And that's the same game that they're going to want in the playoffs, where Kevin's going to want to get the score up into the 60s, close to 70s, and that's going to be in their favor. So I think it's just a battle of styles, and yes, those styles have changed each year because we have different types of kids, and you have to coach them differently and play to your strengths.
Yeah, there were a lot of other observations I had from the game. I think the main one for me, in something maybe to look out for McDowell down the stretch of the season, they still have a few games left to go, but when they play Erie, is I'll be curious to see how much Deontay Flemings plays in the 6A championship game. I thought he was McDowell's best player last night, the sophomore who came off the bench. And, you make a big argument that I think Deontay Flemings probably, if he has a little bit more agility to him and maybe a bit more of an outside touch, you make the argument he's a starting player on the team. Not that he's going to be, but you could make a strong argument to say, look, Deontay has the size. And with that matchup in particular, when you go against Stewart, you have to have a big body that can also move. Because to your point, I was surprised about how athletic Stewart was. Like this guy didn't just pull up in the post 90% of the game. He was attacking. He was driving the lane. He was kicking it out. To your point, he was as good of a disher as he was a scorer. So I'm curious to see if Deontay Flemings plays in the 6A championship game as much as he did last night. Foul trouble was a little bit a part of it as well. And then for Erie, Tom, and maybe you can speak to this, Coach Pulliam is, we're going to get into the system talk in a little bit. He doesn't run that. But what I thought was really fascinating in the game last night for Erie was how disciplined their defense was, specifically when the ball got over half court, in that they did a really good job of mixing up looks. Sometimes they would attack, sometimes they would press, sometimes they wouldn't, but you never knew it was coming until the ball got over half court. And as much as the system is scary because you have to defend against it the entire length of the floor, right? Like Prep, McDowell, they both do that. They're both aggressive. There's some semblance of Erie does a great job, I thought, last night, and when they win this season, of making you think of what you need to do while you're coming across half court. And I thought their defense last night was really, really prolific, not just because they forced McDowell to miss from deep, but because they made McDowell think about what they needed to do when the ball got over half court.
Well, when you play consistent defense like Prep does, that high-paced the whole time, and not just Prep, but maybe you're a half-court man defense all the time. Offensively, you get used to that, right? You know how they're playing you defensively. You get in your rhythm for shooting, make or miss, right? You know the type of defense they're playing. But if you mix it up, especially on a shooting team, right, all of a sudden I'm in a zone. Well, as a shooter, you shoot differently in a zone than you do on man. Right? Maybe you're coming off the dribble or you're coming off a screen faster to get the ball, whereas the zone, it's a spot up shot, right? So the rhythm's different, and that can really affect shooters, especially high school shooters that really rely on getting in that rhythm and that flow to be good, right? And a young kid can struggle with that at times. So for Erie to mix that up a little bit, that really gives some trouble to shooters sometimes.
And so I think the 6A championship game becomes fascinating. My question becomes is, how does Kevin O'Connor use his bench? How early does he? He didn't sub in the first quarter. McDowell only scored 5 points. I thought they did a good job in the second quarter of rectifying their mistakes. The second quarter was, I think, their best shooting quarter of the game. They scored 20
points,
and they made a couple of threes. And I thought they started to get into a rhythm until they just didn't in the third. It was a lot different from the Prep McDowell game on Friday. And I think it's a good point to transition now to Cathedral Prep and where they sit right now at 21. We know how talented they are, but my observation from Friday night's game, Tom, was that you can play with Cathedral Prep if you can force 2 of their 4 scorers off the floor. And I thought for the most part on Friday, McDowell did a great job of containing Amari Horton and a great job of containing Michael Thompson. The problem with prep, and this is obvious for anyone who looks at the stat sheet, is they can attack you in so many different ways that even if you can force Thompson away from the paint, they can still beat you on the outside. And I will say this, Tom, I thought, I mean, Merarkey was obviously the best player, no doubt. And he's been that way for a while this season. But I thought Ashton Wilbur started to get going on Friday. I thought he's been a big piece for this prep team. And it's so hard to stop all four of those guys in the same game. And I think you have to stop at least two of them to have a chance. But even McDowell couldn't come up with a win there at the end of the game. Just your thoughts on what prep is doing right now. Maybe if you have any observations from the prep McDowell game and Ramblers rolling on Tuesday, 108-85 over Meadville.
My biggest observation is certainly not their system. It's just their players, right? That they got more talent. With Nando and Thompson, and even you said Wilbur, right? Horton. Well, I think Horton had 42 last night or the night before.
Right.
People are starting to forget about Kyle Horton now, right? It's him, right? I don't know where the chief is. It's little chief, but no, all jokes aside, they have solid players, right? Maybe the three best players is a combination compared to any other team. So you throw the system out and what they're doing in the high numbers of stats that creates, they're good no matter what. If they sat back and played half court man, boy, if you'd see Horton play half court man like he did in the past, like I'd love to see that a little bit. But they're loaded with that. So it's going to be really hard to beat them throughout the regular season. We'll see how playoffs go when they run into a team that has a little bit more talent. But yeah, McDowell had a stretch where they didn't shoot it real well against them just for a little bit. They had a few turnovers and that happens, right? And then I watched McDowell play against Fairview the following night, and McDowell just shot the lights out. I mean, they didn't miss anything, and I think Fairview's are a very good team, but McDowell just didn't miss, and Fairview turned it over. They were close for the first half. Fairview turned it over a few times in the third quarter. McDowell just made them pay with 3-pointers. And it's hard when a team's making shots like that all the time. For Erie, they got to be able to defend and slow that down. I think a really big factor, Isaac, is that Sebastian will not be playing in the playoffs, right? Because he transferred over. So that's going to be a really different thing for them. Maybe it can be spun into a positive thing because they'll get a different look, but I think he does a really good job on the ball, defending, sharing the ball offensively. So that'll be a difficult situation for them going into the playoffs.
And I think the other thing too is that you have to keep in mind Sharon and Hickory are still looming in 4A as well. Like we don't talk about the Mercer County teams, but those two teams are still on an absolute roll themselves, and they both have big men. Guys who can block in the paint, guard against those sort of shots. Merarkey doesn't need a lot of space, but we know he likes to try to slither his way into the paint, free throw area at times to make those shots. So, it was fascinating watching the game because the game Friday was so much different than the game Tuesday. It was a game of runs on Friday, but prep is just capable of being able to go on those runs where you really just can't stop any of them. Once one of them gets going, the other one gets going as well. And so it becomes interesting for 4A. So we keep an eye on the playoffs as we get closer. We're going to be talking a lot more in the next few weeks about bracketology, maybe predicting who's going to be the top seeds, maybe some upsets to watch. But I wanted to end this episode, Tom, because the last time we chatted, we dove into this a bit, but we didn't do a deep dive about your thoughts on the system. And I think it's a perfect segue in from Cathedral Prep because, there's a love-hate relationship from it. And I watched it on Friday. I was fascinated. In fact, Easton Bozzoli was there too, the Gannon head coach, and him and I were chatting about it afterwards. I called that game on Friday night. The prep went over McDowell. And the system looks a little bit different from high school to college. But, I saw a few of your points in the game on Friday in the first quarter in particular, in the fact that if you break it, you got open guys, they shoot the basketball, they're able to score quickly. And I wanted, if you could, Tom, just take a few minutes. Let's break this down in the system play. Maybe why it can work, why it cannot, and your thoughts on it in high school basketball now that we're seeing it more and more amongst teams, prevalent teams in District 10. Just give me your rundown as to what the system could be and what it could not be in high school.
Eisenhower plays a very similar way also.
They do.
and because they have the players, right? They have several players that can score. I think that system is not a defensive system. People are like, wow, they press and trap and do all this. To me, it's more of an offensive system. Like, we're really strong offensively, and we want to get more shots than that other team. We can score better than them. So yeah, we're gonna make the pace of the game go up. So they're really doing that to make the tempo go up and play faster, not necessarily to get steals, but let's play faster because we can put that ball into the hands of a big guy that usually doesn't dribble and usually doesn't trap. So it puts them in different situations, or they're on the back end shooting a little jumper because they feel that they're wide open on the press, as opposed that normally they're putting it inside and trying to get the ball to their big guy to drop step and get a score. So I think it changes the game for them and puts those other teams in a difficult situation where they aren't comfortable scoring that way, so they don't score as well. And that team running that system, they love to score and they just want to get the ball and let's go down and score more. So it's more of an offensive minded system in my opinion, by watching it. And the more touches we get, the more shots we get, we think we can outscore them. If you look at a lot of the scores that just Cathedral Prep, we always talk about them with that system. The teams they're playing against score more points than any other games that they play because of the system also. But I think Prep's using that to their advantage because they're so strong offensively that they know if they get the ball more, they're going to be able to score more.
Give me your thoughts on the idea of quality of shots versus quantity of shots. I think any coach that plays the system, and I'm sure a lot of coaches around here would tell you the same thing. There's obviously an emphasis on wanting your shooting percentage to be high. However, if it means that you're going to shoot 80, 90, 100 times a game, it's not the end of the world if you shoot 30%. It seems like in this system, and especially at the high school level, where there's just more likelihood of turnovers more consistently than college, because college teams, I think, can figure out the system maybe a bit more than high school, especially in this area, because high school really, besides Prep, Eisenhower, McDowell, they really haven't introduced it a ton yet. What's your thought on the idea of wanting to take as many shots as possible, but they may not all go in? We saw it on Friday, right? Because McDowell was able to take advantage of Prep's defense whenever they broke the press. It was a 3-on-1, and I feel like Liam Marsh hit about 12 threes in a row from the corner, and it kept them in the game, and at one point gave them a double-digit lead. Would you stress quality versus quantity in terms of high school basketball and taking shots, and what the system does for that? Because I think that's an interesting angle to this as well on the offensive side of things.
Well, I know a lot of the talking points when I'm coaching is we want to pass up a good shot and get a great shot, right? Because those are usually higher percentage, right? If we can get a layup as opposed to a mid-range jumper, right? Not that mid-range jumpers are bad, right? Those can be great shots too if they're wide open and it's off a good pass, right? 3-pointers are great shots. Also, you only need to shoot 30% from three to equal out to what, like 50% from the floor, because you get an extra point. So there's so many different metrics involved in basketball now. But I always lean on the side that I want to get a great shot, because they're higher percentage. And if you're going to really sit back on your defense, right, and try to make them get great shots, right, it's just a different strategy. If you're going to shoot 50% in a game, it doesn't matter if you shoot 80 shots or 40 shots. If you shoot 50%, you're going to make half of them. So I think if you're a good shooter, good shooting team, that coach wants to get as many shots as possible, because eventually that shooting percentage is going to work its way out, right? If you miss your first couple, well, by the end of the game, you're going to be making some. And I think that's kind of the look at it. But you've seen over the years, like you can remember in the March Madness tournament, there's a team that shoots so many threes that they have some really bad losses, right? A team that they should have beat, but they just couldn't make shots. And that can really get you when you rely on something like that. If you're getting great shots, right, it may be different if you're evening it out with layups and free throws and stuff. But at the other side of that, teams that can make a lot of threes can beat anybody, right? They can even beat a better team than them because they shoot it so well. So I think all those factors come into play. And like you said, the difference between college and high school is these kids are 16, 17 years old. You never know what you're going to get every night, right? So it's just exciting to see what happens.
To me, Tom, I think it almost can be more rewarding playing this in high school. And I say that because of what I would consider the snowball effect. Now, we didn't see it on Friday with McDowell Prep. I think both those teams are so well coached that it doesn't really become a problem. But when you get Prep against other competition, maybe different regions, right? Some region 6-7 crossovers when the teams they're playing don't necessarily have the athletes to match up with all four of their scores. What I mean by the snowball effect is that once there's one turnover and it gets in a 16 or 17-year-old's head, I mean, good luck. I mean, you coach these guys, right? The second that there is any little shred of adversity, it's a lot harder to coach them or teach them out of that than if you're in college. You just don't have the experience. Your brain is not as mature as you would be if you were in the college game. And I think what Prep does, and even Eisenhower did against Mercyhurst Prep in the first three quarters when I was there, is the snowball effect becomes you turn the ball over once, you inbound it on the next possession, and now you immediately are thinking, right? So the second that you think when you're playing against this system, you're done. You just have to go for it and try to get the ball over half court as quickly as you can. What is play the antithesis here, Tom, as being an opposing coach? If you were still in the high school coaching ranks today, and let's say you're still with Erie or wherever you are, and you're playing a team like a Prep, what would be the game plan going into coaching against the system, knowing that it is one that can cause consistent doubt in players that are 16, 17 years old?
Well, number one, you want to be a good coach in the way of knowing your players, right? I think if you've coached a player for a couple years, if you're close with them, you know the things that you can say or do to get them confident. Like there's some players that you just need to ride and get on and yell at, and they react to that in a really positive way, and some that you just need to be positive with and build them up. So good coaches need to do that in those situations. That's an important part of it. I think the way I would do things is really try to maintain the tempo against them, and it makes me go back to some of my games when I was coaching. I guess it would be Central Tech, and we were playing East High with Matt Jones, right? Because Coach Jones and the East High Warriors would love to go up and down the floor, right? And I remember one game, we would always talk about we don't want to play their tempo. They like to get things chaotic. They like to press and make you play really fast, right? And I think at Central, it was like a 44 to 40 game, something like that. It was really close. And I don't even know who won, but I do know that we won at East, and it was 99-96. And me and Matt Jones talked about that and laughed all the time. Like we were up and down, and that was his game, right? That's how they wanted to play. So you try not to play their game because they've been practicing it and playing it all year, and that's how they want to do it. And that's really tough to do when a team wants to play fast, for you to get the ball and slow it down and try to be deliberate and get a really great shot, right? A team like Erie, I want to see them play again because I think they can play with them. They can score on the backside of the post, but they have to be able to slow it down and go to Stewart inside and slow that game down and give Prep less possessions, right? So it's just a battle of styles there, and I think that's what it's going to take to beat them. I think the one loss they have to Newman Grotti, who's obviously a great team, Newman likes to play that way as well, right? So it didn't bother them, right? And they have the guns, they have the horses, whatever you want to call it, to stay with them. And Newman shot it really well in the second half, scored really well against Prep to beat them. So in the playoffs, man, you got to slow the tempo down on those guys, but they still have three really strong players. No matter how much you slow it down, it's going to be hard to beat them.
Yeah, I agree. And the Erie Prep round 2 fascinates me because if Jaden Stewart plays the same way he played against McDowell, I think Erie's got a great chance. They had a fighting chance the last time they played each other, and I think it just came down to a few more shots made, which if that's going to be the recipe every game, Prep's going to win those 99 times out of 100. But you have to have a great big man is what I've learned. Erie's got that. McDowell maybe has that with Fleming's potentially in the works. Again, though, they won't play in the playoffs, but just for future years if Jeremy Lynch keeps playing the style. So fascinating discussion. It's great to see that stuff in person and how much different it is from high school to college. And you never know, Tom. Maybe it makes its way into Erie more central than what it is right now with just a few teams doing it. But when you get to contrasting styles, it's really a fascinating argument. And we saw it a bit on Friday, but I think Prep Erie is even more so of that contrast than Prep McDowell.
Yeah, I think so. But what I like about that matchup is that I think Erie can play fast also. I think Erie can play both ways. Not that Prep can't, but Prep really wants to play fast. So it'll be interesting to see how Coach Pulliam does trying to manage that tempo. If they want to play fast like Prep, or if they try to slow it down, maybe mix it up. It'll be really interesting to see. You think back of football in the maybe the Ravens and how they would, when Trent Dilfer, when they didn't score that much and they just won defensively. Like, a lot of people didn't like watching that, right? Unless you're an old football guy that loves defense and loves the ins and outs of it, right? We're all, the society just loves offense and fantasy football and all the prop bets and stuff that people look at now. So it's changed, right? So the styles that Prep and Eisenhower, certainly Gannon, that are running, they're fun to watch. It's fun to play that way. I just think I'm a little old school, and I'm trying to battle it. Right? Sorry, Coach Lynch.
Hey,
I'm battling against it.
Nick Artman, my partner, and I in this podcast network would tell you we are a defensive-minded podcast channel here at Gem City. We got Coach Koval, who's great at the defensive schemes, and I don't know if you've seen any episodes with Wayne Bradford. It would be so fascinating to have the two of you on to talk about the old versus the new age way of thinking between football and basketball, because there are some similarities.
Certainly.
And I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. If you, to your point, every year you have a new roster, you have different guys that come in. If you're able to play the way Prep plays a year, great, do it. If you need to play better defensively, like Erie has this season, great. You can win both ways. But to your point, you just have to know what your team is. And so I think that's the most fascinating thing is, do the coaches understand the personnel they have? A decent amount don't, but there are a few and becoming more increasing ones that do. So it's just a fascinating argument to talk about. Any fun post-championship celebration party, Tom? Or are you getting some ice cream for the kids? What does that look like nowadays when you go win that end-of-season tournament?
Oh, ice cream. That's small time, right? We got Otis 12 coming in. Mike Myotis is bringing us some pizza, some boneless wings. We're going to have a party on Friday, right before the Fairview General McLean game, and we're going to bring all the boys to the game right after that and hopefully cheer them on to a win against the Lancers.
Oh, I'll tell you what, that you do it big. I got done with my baseball season and I got like a small baby cone from Dairy Queen or whatever. That's evolved too, evidently. Post-game celebrations have been great. Enjoy the wings though, my friend. Should be fun on Friday. I'm a Homer Lancer at heart, but I think Fairview's got a good run going on. Great stuff. Let's talk again next week, Tom. I know we got a lot more playoff stuff to get to, just a couple more weeks left in the regular season, and then it's postseason, man. And I'll tell you what, some of these brackets are looking pretty juicy if everything stays chalk the rest of the year.
Exciting stuff. I'm headed to the Prep McDowell girls tomorrow to watch that. We got Super Bowl coming up. There's a bunch of good games on Friday. Lot of fun stuff in February. I always loved February basketball. It was a great time to coach. You get re-energized as the playoffs come in there, right? So the long winter, that long January, now you just get a little bit more energy and you're ready to go into the playoffs. It's exciting stuff for the players, the coaches, the fans, and certainly us to talk about it.
Lord knows winter's been long, but we're still here and we're still rolling. We're still having fun. All right. Our next show is coming up tomorrow, Off the Record podcast at 7:00. Tom and I are back next Wednesday for Gem City Sports, and we have more, including the draft podcast next week as well. We'll see you all back here tomorrow for Off the Record at 7:00. Make it a great Wednesday, everybody. Check out some high school basketball while you're around.